Hello, happy Monday. Welcome to Monday Mentor with Jen. I'm Jen Whitmer, and I help teams and leaders solve conflict and personality clashes. And each week we do a little bit of mentorship on Monday morning. And I am so excited about this week's mentor. His name is Mark Evans. He is a friend, a mentor to me. He is a therapist and coach, and he talks a lot about the importance of mental health in the workspace. And so I'm so excited to bring Mark on. If you would welcome my friend Mark. Hey, Mark.
Hi, Jen.
How are you?
I'm good, thanks.
Good. So tell the people a little bit about yourself. Like, how did you come to, introduce yourself to us and what you do?
Well, I've been a coach and therapist since 2005. Prior to then, I worked for a mental health charity, and prior to then, had my own sort of struggles in life. So I've learned, the value of what people like you and I do, what we bring to people. But yeah, it's nearly 21 years as a mental health and wellbeing practitioner. I've worked in higher education for universities. I've worked for the employee assistance industry. I've run my own business, and more recently, as you know, I'm a published author.
That's right. So Mark has written a book called How to Transform Your Life with Impact. If you would like it, you can, grab it there. And one of the reasons I wanted Mark to share that is he's had such a wide variety of workplace experiences. So not everybody who comes to Monday Mentor, if you're here, say hello in the comments. But not everybody who watches is an entrepreneur, and not everybody is a teacher. Not everybody is a vice president. You have this varied work experience that I think, as I've listened to you talk, shows how people are people in all kinds of circumstances. And one of the things I wanted to hear you talk a little bit about is the importance of mental wellness and mental health in the workplace, like that specific place. Sometimes we think of that as like, oh, you got to do that on your own time. You got to figure that out. But why is it important as leaders to be really conscious of our own mental wellness and others in the workplace?
I think what I'd say initially is that mental health and wellness is neither a personal nor a professional phenomena. So people don't suddenly leave their poor mental health and well-being at the door as they go into work, and it's not there to pick up when they're going back home. The analogy I give is like a fish in water. We're surrounded by it all of the time, but I think the key thing for human beings is that we need to be aware of what we're surrounded by, as opposed to the fish which just swims around and isn't aware about it. If we're not aware, then well, that's going to hit the bottom line of the business in terms of profitability, whether presenteeism, absenteeism, poor performance. The list is a long one, and I know there's a figure that is generally bandied about that every £1 invested in mental health and well-being at work, returns £5, 5 British pounds, in return. So it just ticks all of the boxes in so many ways, and to neglect it, you're not neglecting your mental health and well-being solely. You're neglecting your business as well, yourself as a leader, your employees, if you lead employees.
That's such a great point. I mean, the picture I had when you were talking about you don't check it at the door, it's not like, oh, here are my problems, I'm going to put them in coat check, kick your little ticket and go to work for the day. Like, they come with you. And I think recognizing that for ourselves, like you said, knowing what the water is around us, that our mental well-being is affecting our performance. And if we're leading others, there's a ripple effect there. But also that your people are coming with their own challenges to the table. And so what do we do as leaders to start with ourselves? Because I always like to start with ourselves, to know when I'm a little bit off track, that my own mental wellness is starting to suffer.
Well, I think we have to understand what our telltale signs are. So they're going to be different for different people, but my big thing is the importance of emotions. I see emotions as messages, a form of communication from one part of us to another part of us, from our emotional self, for want of a better phrase. And if we can tune into the emotional state that we're in, then we're potentially tuning into the messages that we're giving ourselves as to whether we're in a good place or not so good place. For me, thriving and surviving is the only show in town for human beings, as it is for all living things, and if we're not thriving and surviving, then our emotional self will let us know by making us feel a certain way. So if we're aware that our emotions are messages, and we're aware that they're trying to guide us towards a state of thriving and surviving, and away from pain, from suffering, from loss, and all of the things like that, then we can, we get good at that. We can tune into those emotions and just say, actually, do you know what? I've woken up this morning and I'm not in a good place. I'm going to talk to my partner, or I'm going to arrange a session with my coach or therapist, or do you know what? I'm going to get some line management support when I get to work. We're tuning into the emotions because we're aware of them. We're connecting them with the fact that we're not in a good place, and we're doing something about it. That's a nice ideal sequence of events. And like I say, that person goes into work and they have a better day, or the manager doesn't lose that employee, or that employee's family is feeling safe and secure because the mother or the father is looking after their mental health and well-being. It's a multifaceted thing. You can't run a business if you're too depressed to get out of bed in the morning. That's fundamentally about it.
That's true. I like the way you're talking about it too, as our emotions are messages. I think there's this old school idea that we just don't bring our emotions to work, which is actually physically impossible. Like our emotions come with us everywhere. And so the idea that we can experience our emotions, but also see them as messages rather than controls is a really powerful and healthy distance thing. Like, oh, I am experiencing this, and it's a message that's telling me about something.
Yeah.
So what do you do when you have an employee that you're noticing isn't super aware of their emotions and the impact their emotions are having on them? What are your suggestions for leaders in helping other people kind of lead into that? Like, oh, you don't seem to be doing real well. How does a leader do that?
I think first and foremost, a leader needs to maybe do some advanced practice, some
Mm.
role playing, some role modeling. To what I encourage people to do, leaders or anyone else for that matter, is really to list their primary conversations. Their conversations with family, with partners, with colleagues, with bosses. And using a questionnaire that I have, they can have a look at, how they score those questionnaires. Are they positive? Do I get a good feeling from them? Do they always result in positive outcomes, so that the leader begins to be able to understand their communication style, which is important to the way that they make people feel, the way that they feel, before and after a conversation. So after they've taken a step back and they've assessed their styles of communication, the conversations that they're having, then I think that gives them a lot more confidence to then have what we might call difficult conversations regarding mental health and well-being in the workplace. My big thing in terms of how a leader could talk to one of their employees is quite frankly to ask them,
Mm.
how do you want me to talk to you? What do you need from our conversation? What qualities and characteristics can I bring to our conversation that can make that conversation one that you're happy with and that I'm happy with, and we both get the outcomes we're after for ourselves as individuals, but also for our teams or for our wider businesses.
Oh my gosh, there's so many good things you said in there that I just kind of want to pull out. Like, here are the nuggets that are so important. One is you took it back to the leader working on themselves, not just their own emotions, but what's my style? What is the outward expression of who I am to others? Like, we have to start there. We can't just like jump in and think we're going to fix other people. Like, we have to know our role in that, ingredient in that recipe, for lack of a better term. But the second thing too is I think there is a fallacy among leaders that we should just know. We should just like, oh, I know what this person needs. And it is so wise to ask them, what can I do for you? And one of my kids last night was like, can you read this for me? Blah, blah, blah. And I was like, as a, former editor, I know how to edit a paper, but I didn't know what she was wanting. And so just asking her, what feedback are you wanting from me? And she could tell me was so much better than me jumping in as mom, telling her this, this comma, this, like this, all of that. And we can extrapolate that. That's not just good parenting. That's also just good leading. Like, what do you need from me right now? What's the most helpful piece that can make you succeed or help you succeed? I just love that that's a part of the practice. So one of the things that I think is so interesting, having read your book, having used things in your book, is just the idea of this model. I've just found it really helpful at times. I think about, okay, what is the impact here, and like bring things back. Can you just walk us through what is impact and what is this model that you've created?
So the impact model is a 6 stage model, 6 stages based on six what I would consider powerful concepts, and its origins are in my work as a coach and therapist. Because I still, but came across a lot of bad coaches and a lot of bad therapists. I met clients who'd wasted a lot of money talking to people who hadn't helped them to make progress, to overcome their difficulties, achieve their goals, their challenges. So I asked myself a question: well, what is ineffective therapy? What is ineffective coaching? And what's its effective counterpart? And I suppose just through a combination of having that idea to start off with, and then just studying my conversations when I help people. What do I do that's different to when I don't help people? And that's the origins of my own approach, really. And then I was lucky enough to call my business Conversations with Impact, and the word impact, turns into an acronym, and the 6 stages that I came up with, which form the basis to my practice. Those 6 stages are a conversation with impact. So a conversation with impact is simply one that makes the difference that someone is after. And by definition, it's different from all our other conversations, because if our other conversations were enough, then people wouldn't need to come and see people like you and I. They would just turn to their husbands or their partners or their friends and get what they needed. So clearly there's something about a conversation that coach and therapist can offer that our wider support network can't or won't, which is understandable. But that has to be in place. Otherwise, no one's going to make any progress. So that's the first stage of my impact model. And then once that conversation with impact is established, I can take them through making sense of what they're going through. The emotions as messages, is a key aspect of that. Because if we don't know what we're going through, we can't make sense of it, then we're always going to be misdiagnosing and coming up with the wrong treatments and solutions, so on and so forth. The third stage is P for patterns. So again, we can understand our mental health and well-being as being comprised of our patterns of thought, of behavior, of feeling, of relationships, to people, to places and objects. And again, if someone's not in a good place, then we can understand that through reference to their negative patterns. If they are in a good place, which is where we're trying to get someone, then again we can understand that. How does someone change their thinking, their behavior, their feeling, their patterns of relationships to get them into a good place? How does that happen? How do they make that transition? The 4th stage is A for acceptance. You and I have had conversations about, difficulties around acceptance. So if we can't accept who we are, what we do, the life we lead, if we struggle with that, we open up that, what I call a fantasy reality gap, where who we are, who we think we are is not who we actually are. And, and my job often as a therapist is to show someone with low self-esteem or low self-worth, actually they do have value, they do have worth, and that the fantasy self is that they don't believe that's true. So acceptance is a really big aspect of the impact model. And then the final 2 stages are C for challenge. So, and I know you like my Goldilocks principle of challenge, so I'll bring that in to bring a smile to your face.
It's one of my favorite things.
So the Goldilocks challenge is reflective of the fact that if we have too little challenge or too much challenge in life, then we're going to struggle. So we need to find what I call our sweet spot of challenge, and the Goldilocks principle is how we find that sweet spot of challenge. So borrowed from the famous, fairy tale of Goldilocks and the 3 bears, not too much challenge, not too little, but just right, and what we do is we find that sweet spot of challenge. We make the Goldilocks principle work for someone, and the way that we do that is to bring in additional resources, missing resources, what the person doesn't have enough of, which explains why their level of challenge is either too high or too low. And by bringing in the resources, it could be, better mental health. It could be, support. It could be, a whole bunch of resources, but we identify what they are, bring them in, and the level of challenge then finds its sweet spot, and the Goldilocks principle takes effect. And then the final stage is T for transformation. And that's really about what you and I are all about. We want to get someone to the place where they are who they want to be, doing what they want to be doing, living the life that they want to be leading, either personally or professionally. And our job is to put them on the journey that's going to take them to that destination. So they're my 6 stages, Jen, and that's just a study of what I think works in our professions, in my professions, and that's my impact model.
Yeah, I really do like your model for so many reasons. One is like, I always like a model because I'm like, okay, wait a second, where am I? And the model kind of helps make sense of things. And one of the things that I see is overlap in how I talk about something is that Goldilocks principle. I just call it the zone of proximal development. Like we have to we have to have some challenge, otherwise we actually languish. But if we have too much, it goes over into panic, and then we're not thriving at all. And a lot of that as a leader is often having to do with workload and purpose. Like, what do I know what my purpose is, and is it connected to the actual workload that I'm doing, and is that workload too much? I know very few people where their workload is too little. And but when we're kind of working through those challenges, I think your model is really helpful in identifying what is the challenge about my workload is, and it's and how do we start to shift that so we can transform. And one of the things about coaching is that it's skill building, so we can use it again and again, but we also come back to it. So like, I've asked Mark, I'm like, Mark, you have to coach me through this, I'm really struggling. And that's been so helpful to me, and I know that you have done the same. And that there isn't, like, the idea of coaching in the workplace sometimes means, oh my gosh, I'm a failure, I'm on a professional improvement plan and I got to have that, and that's really not its purpose. And I think you do such powerful work in that space, especially in the UK. If you hadn't figured out that Mark is from the UK, that mental health in the workplace isn't because you're a failure, it's because you're human and we've all got things to learn. And that's so powerful that I have different types of coaches for different things. I am not going to ask my business coach to help me with something else that is unrelated to them, like, I don't know, gardening. Like, I have a friend who has a garden coach. That's what made me think of that. And, like, the garden coach isn't going to help you with your mental health. Like, it's different. And so the coaching model that you use, I think, is really powerful to help people recognize, especially in that, what other additional resources do we need? And so that's really, really helpful. And Mark, tell me a little bit about, so your book, and it outlines your impact model. Is there anything that you really just want people to know as they're going out and getting this book that would be really great for them to, like, this is one of the things that you should turn to? Do they need to go through it in order? Is it I'm going to turn to a chapter? Tell us a little bit about your book.
Well, it's funny because I've had a recent client sessions, is to get an idea of how individual clients are going through the book. But actually, the most common way that clients are going through the book is that they get to a chapter fully expecting to move on to the next chapter, and they don't, because
Mm.
the first chapter is thought provoking. Because the first chapter is about dealing with the nature of our conversations, and people understanding that their mental health and well-being is a reflection of their conversations, then that takes up quite a large chunk of our day. We're talking to ourselves in the morning, our partners in the morning, our kids in the morning, our bosses, our colleagues, so our conversation, and then our self-talk, right at the end of the day, it's pretty much, unless, and even in our sleep, we're talking to ourselves. So I'm not surprised that people get stuck on that first chapter, because possibly for the first time they've taken a step back and think, how do I talk to myself? How do I talk to my to my husband, to my wife, to my partner, kids, friends, family? And so that, in my experience, people are taking quite a long time on that chapter. What I say to people in the book is read it through quickly once and then start again and move through it
Mm.
methodically. I do say that's an aspiration, then because actually what I'm it because it was easy for me to write, relatively easy, because I'd just done this over and over again, and I suppose I assumed that people would move through the book relatively quickly like I did. But of course, that's not the case, because often
Mhm.
people are being asked questions that they've never thought about areas of their lives, that they'd never addressed before. So, but if I could ask, the audience to do one thing, um, is to understand that mental health and well-being is multifaceted. You
Mm.
have
Yes.
to be about your conversations. You have to be able to make sense of it. The underpinning by patterns. The role of acceptance. The 6 stages. I'd ask people to, if they don't read the whole thing cover to cover, at least take on board those 6 concepts that I took you through. And then like any sort of self-reflective person, go away and connect those 6 concepts to your own lives. And see if it helps you to make sense of whether you're in a good place or a not so good place.
Mm. One of the things that I loved about the book is it did make me slow down. I'm always like, how fast can I get through something? Like ruffling the papers, and because I want to,
Yeah,
I
it's
just
not
want
a
to.
it's not a fast book. Right?
And that's what's so good about it, though. It's like it forced me to slow down and really consider. I'm like, oh, how is that working in the multiple dimensions? Like, oh, this is working okay over here, but over here, this isn't. why is that? And like, it was helpful in that sense. So I really appreciated that things that get me to slow down are usually very powerful and impactful at the end of the day in making my life and the lives of the people I serve flourish. And that's what I'm after. So I appreciate that. I can't believe our time is up. I just glanced
Blimey.
because we've been chatting as we do. So I'm so grateful for you for coming on today for your
Pleasure.
afternoon time. It's probably, supper time over there. But tell the people where to find you and where they can keep up with you after they have purchased your slow book. But where can they keep up with you on the socials and where can they find you?
So you can find me on LinkedIn. So just put Mark Evans, Leicester, United Kingdom. See my smiley face. You can find my book on Amazon, and you can visit my website. Although I'm getting a new website done, and do you know when you look at old websites and you really can't stand to look at them anymore? So if anyone does visit my website, it's being changed. I promise. But you can find me there as well.
Isn't that just a metaphor for all the things that we were just talking about? Continual improvement. Yes, Marcia, I will drop a link in the comments to the book if you can't, because sometimes when you're watching on your phone, you can't get that QR code. So I will drop a link in a second. And so I'm so grateful, Mark. And
Pleasure. No, really, thanks for the invite, Jen. It's been great.
absolutely. All right, everybody. Next week, we will be back, same bat time, same bat place, Mondays at 1 p.m. Eastern. And we will see you then. Bye, everybody.
See ya.